Well, the Falcons are one day closer to training camp. They kicked off mandatory mini camp on Tuesday at the Benz. Pretty cool to be down at the Benz again, just to kind of check things out, especially because while there were 4 players who did not make it, of course, Arthur Smith announced that early on just to kind of get that out of the way. We knew that Kyle Pitts wouldn't be there because, of course, he's still rehabbing. So is Caleb Huntley. So is Eddie Goldman. And, of course, Avery Williams is out for the season. But who we did see that was really a sight for sore eyes was we saw Cordarrelle Patterson and we also saw Taquan Graham. And the reason I say that is because, of course, seeing Cordarrelle Patterson out there, just kind of being with those guys, coaching them up, that's always such a positive thing. So that was one of the observations I made too. And then I was watching Taquan Graham and his speed, looking like he was back to himself, right? In the drills that he was doing with the defensive front. So those were kind of a couple of the initial observations that I had. But one of the other observations that I wanted to kind of get your take on as well was a part of the conversation that was had pre-practice, and then you kind of saw it show up again at practice. And that was that conversation about just the continuing camaraderie that is developing, but also understanding who the leader in the building is, right? And a lot of that makes a difference if you know those things up front. So Arthur Smith talked about the excitement, the advantage of having David Onyemata on this side of the ball and not having to face the likes of him like you've had to do the last 4 years, right? And Grady Jarrett had mentioned it to us last week, but to see those two kind of jarring back and forth in a good way and kind of conferring yesterday during practice, it was really cool because it also speaks to what David Onyemata said about the fact that Grady Jarrett is still the leader of this offense, even with all of these guys in the room, Pro Bowlers and future Hall of Famers. That's still the guy that's at the anchor. He's the core and he's the heart and soul of not just this defense, but I would argue even this entire team. But how important is it, Jarvis, and you'll be up there, of course, in Flowery Branch today, kind of seeing that interaction and kind of seeing how they're using TQ as well, hopefully. What would you say is, how critical is it, A, for those guys to be communicating so well early on, and B, for that entire defense to understand that as Grady goes both on the field and off the field, so goes this defense?
I think it kind of speaks to the level of respect that they have for Grady, not just as a man, but as a player, because that's what matters, right? Like the guys will be a little shaky, off the field, they do what they do. But when it comes to, Sundays at 1 o'clock, 9-7 is going to show up. And I think that those guys truly understand. And I think that it speaks volumes to what David Onyemata said when he was talking about how this is still Grady's team, because those guys know each other. Those guys interacted with each other, not only, not going up against each other specifically, but, the teams playing against each other in the division, when you play for the Saints. But those guys, have spent time together, so they interact with each other because they have there's a lot of commonalities when you think about those guys, right? Because both of those guys weren't like highly drafted, guys coming into the league and everything, and they've pretty much earned their way. They've earned everything that they've gotten since they stepped into the door. So for those guys to be, on new contracts and having the respect around the league, and Arthur Smith talking about Onyemata being a guy who's a mother blanker, to game plan for. All those things matter, right? So now you have two guys in the interior that, are in a space where other people respect it. Not only just the fan base, like, oh yeah, Grady's good. Yeah, it's cool. That's cool and everything. You have the support. But when other teams say that and other teams acknowledge that when they're game planning, that's when you have someone. But now the Falcons have two of those guys, and for Onyemata to understand, like, this is still Grady's team, this is still Grady's unit, and he's going to be the leader of this team. He just want to add to it. He just want to add that specialness on Sundays that we've been looking for, and clamoring for. Hashtag pass rush matters. Hashtag stop the run matters. All that good stuff.
Hashtag get him on the ground.
Hashtag get him on the ground.
I just added that one.
Yeah. And it's, maybe even kick him in the butt hind parts a little bit. You know what I'm saying?
With
that too. We play to the echo of the whistle on this team. Like, I would absolutely love to watch that on Sunday. So yeah, I think that when you have guys like that this early on, acknowledging and understanding what the deal is when they walk through this door up at Flowery Branch, I think that is just going to do nothing but help them build that chemistry that they need to build. And as far as from a rotational standpoint, who's going to play much, who's going to play this much. And I think that's going to help Ryan Nielsen get this thing figured out pretty quickly going into training camp.
Indeed. And of course, Mr. Arthur Blank was at practice as well. And you could see him having some conversation with Grady Jarrett and the newly minted Falcon, newly minted in quotes, Calais Campbell. So good to see him out there as well. Also, good to see CP back. And one of the things that CP talked about yesterday was he really doesn't care how they use him. Would it be good to be used again like he was last season? In part, yes, because you got him in heavy rotation. So who doesn't want to get as many reps and snaps as he can? And of course, 2021 was where we really got a chance to see, oh, wow, okay, he really is as versatile as they say, just didn't see as much of him. Now the question becomes, you may or may not see as much of him, but Jarvis, you may see as much of him just maybe more as a pass threat than as a running threat, right? But the good of it is the fact that he is there to round out that running back group, right? Because a bunch of them, Bijan Robinson, for example, Scotty Miller, CP, those guys were actually going back and forth between getting some snaps as return men as well. So I think it's really interesting. And the reason I say that, Jarvis, is because in my opinion, if you're a Bijan Robinson, you can get as much information and you can soak up all there is to soak up when a CP is on the field, able to stand next to you. And I saw him giving him some feedback for reps when he was running, when he was in the slot, when he was practicing with the return team. That to me is important as well, to have that kind of veteran who has a very similar skill set to what you have and has been doing it at such a high level, not just across his entire career, but particularly to see him at his best in all three phases last season. And I say all three phases, meaning running, passing, and of course, returning.
And T, when you think about it, like, man, he's 32 years old.
32.
So, yeah, like, so, yeah, and he just turned 32 in March. So, yeah, I'm not people who saying, oh, what his role going to be, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter because guess what? He's not the only running back on this team 2 years ago where it was no choice, where he had to doggone get the rock, 15 to 16 times a game because, Arthur Smith kind of kept him in. He even limited his touches back then, when he knew he needed them. And that was pretty much all he had, because, it knows Mike Davis wasn't doing anything. So I think right now, given the talent that you have, you got a running back in Tyler Algier who broke the rookie rushing record that had been around since before, you and I were probably even born, T. You know what I'm saying? So when you think about that aspect of it, and now you bring in Bijan Robinson, who is all worldly, he's walking on water, he's turning water into wine and all that stuff. He's going to do all of that, And if you don't believe me, go to Aaron Freeman's Locked On Falcons. I promise you. He'll tell you all about what Bijan Robinson got going on, for the Atlanta Falcons this year. So I think that I'm so cool with, Cordarrelle Patterson having a reduced role, and at the end of the day, just from a schematic standpoint, right, Arthur Smith can play around with a lot of stuff because he can line Cordarrelle Patterson up at wide receiver. A lot of times, like when you have him and Bijan and potentially – Tyler Algier in the game at the same time. That's possible. That is a big possibility. So
yes,
the formations and everything are going to be something that Arthur Smith is going to be able to play around with. And frankly, T, I'm excited about it. I'm looking forward to see how this thing plays out just from a Sunday to Sunday basis. This is going to be very interesting.
Oh yeah, I am too. I think it's almost like a kid in a candy store, right? Because you think about Arthur Smith and his ability to go with an 11, a 12, even a 13 package, if you will, is amazing. But the other one that I saw briefly yesterday, and I had to run a little bit before practice wrap, so I'm really interested, Jarvis, to see what your observations will be from Flowery today. And that is that intriguing battle at nickel. You think about Mike Hughes and him being brought in. But don't forget, there's a D Alford out there lurking. And listen, everydayers, right? Everydayers, if you want to weigh in, or if there's a position battle that you guys want us to take a look at and kind of hone in on, let us know. Drop that in the comments section because we really appreciate the fact that Locked On, and in particular ATL Day Ones, is your fans' choice for everyday coverage of the Falcons and really any team in our space, because Locked On, hey, you're our team and we are your team every single day. So don't forget to check us out on YouTube, drop us some comments, and check us out wherever you get your podcasts.